Hello, I'm Jenna from Present Path Tarot, and today I want to talk about Mercury Retrograde with astrologer Nicole Garçeau, who's from British Columbia. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Jenna.
So we're going to talk about Mercury Retrograde, but before we get started, I just wanted to hear, you said you have flashcards for astrology.
Yes. Basically, like I'm a graduate from Dr. Perry's astropsychology class. And so what we've done is created top of the line astrology flashcard deck with a beautiful 11 by 17 poster that comes with it. So it's a lot of hard work that's been put into that and recently published. So very excited about that. And then, like I was mentioning, match the glyph for those astro lovers that love to introduce astrology to their young ones. Match the glyph, it's like a memory game, right? Even beginners in astrology, they, don't recognize the glyph for Saturn or Jupiter or some aspects. So as fun as it is for the kids to have a beautiful introduction to astrology, the beginner can definitely benefit from that too. So they could test those skills of knowing which glyph is what.
I love that. That's so fun. I love teaching and I love tools for teaching, so that's great.
That's
What
what
did
I'm
you
about.
think of
Yeah.
astrology?
Well, it was it's kind of an interesting story because I was the skeptic. So I remember years ago back in Ontario, a friend of mine and I were talking, and I said, "Yeah, I would love to have a good tarot reader that you can recommend." And then, a mutual friend said, "Oh, you have to see this astrologer." And then I said, I don't know about those astrology people. I was one of them.
As a tarot reader,
And I
I'm
said,
grateful that you put us in a safer net than the astrologers.
right, because I lacked experience, I lacked knowledge. And so what happened was that I really wanted to go for a tarot reading. And then what convinced me is that she also pulls cards. So I said, I'll give her a shot. That's what I told myself. So she was going through the chart and telling me things about a recent breakup. If I haven't broken up, I was right about to, and that was with my ex-husband. I'm like, and she talked about all these things and, even predicted me getting pregnant with a gentleman that was not supposed to have kids. Yeah.
Wow.
And I said, that can't be it, and then, oh, well, maybe it's something else. And sure enough, she was bang on. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh,
So
it is. It is.
I love how people assume that I know astrology because I'm a tarot reader, which I find really funny. I'm like, no, and sometimes when on like Google Business, I have to put myself as a psychic astrologer.
Uh,
I'm like, that's like totally different fields. But I do love
Absolutely.
astrology and dabble in trying to understand it. Um, and as I was thinking about Mercury retrograde and how I've learned to manage Mercury retrograde, I thought I really would love to bring an expert on who can talk about how we can make the most of Mercury retrograde and overcome our anxieties around it. Um, and you popped up into my feed.
Yes. Thanks to my graphic designer who's responsible for making those decks, she's absolutely amazing. But
What's her name?
pardon me, sorry?
What's her name?
Safira.
Oh, Sophia Stone. Oh, she did the graphic design on those.
She
Right.
did. Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
she's great.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that with Mercury retrograde, it's one of those things. Yes, it's renowned for, miscommunication and, purchasing things that you have to return, all these things. But it's an amazingly reflective time as well. But the most important thing that people need to know when it comes to Mercury retrograde is, where is this falling in your chart? And because, see, the thing is, it was like what made us connect was, the example I gave. And this is why, and I teach my students this, is pay attention to the degree as it enters Mercury retrograde. So for me, it was the 10th house. And what is the 10th house? Well, the 10th house is, the career, the direction in life you're going, but it's also your social status. And what is social status? It's like, are you a boss? Are you a supervisor? Or, but it's also from single status to in a relationship, vice versa as well. Engaged to married, like these are different, labels of status that we put on ourselves. So as Mercury went into shadow, I just happened to come across somebody that I met. And then, as things would have it, I'm obviously moving from one campground to the next as I, find a place to call home that feels like home. So what does he do? He re-invites me back. So this is classic Mercury retrograde. So it reminds me back to the campsite that I left. So traveling Mercury to revisit, and it's square Neptune. What is it? A place of retreat. It's, it's the wilderness, place where we escape, to enjoy and be serene in nature, bliss. But I'll say too, though, as I was traveling, Neptune, my head was in the clouds and I took a wrong turn. I was listening to retrograde, but yeah,
Now,
and then that's
is
the
this
thing is that
particular square that you're talking about relevant to this particular Mercury retrograde? So looking
absolutely.
at each Mercury retrograde as a unique experience, and in this particular case, that square is playing out in this round.
Yeah, and there's two things going on with this Mercury retrograde is that um the fact that it's square Mercury square Neptune. But the thing is, usually a Mercury retrograde lasts about it travels like 14 minutes in the and what minutes are is that every sign has 30 degrees. But these are what we call arc minutes. So then what happens is that Mercury, will travel 14 minutes, retrograde, retrace, then go direct, and then go back. This one is only 8. So it never leaves that, it rarely leaves that square just for a smidgen of time, and then it's back in that square aspect to Neptune. So the Neptune influence on this Mercury retrograde is big. So it grinds through those degrees, and if it's activating any part of your natal chart, it'll be more prominent and more of a personal experience for yourself. And yeah, and see, like the thing is, as Mercury went retrograde, that's when I was back at that campsite that I had left. So,
Ah,
but my theme is, and he's no astrologer by any means.
right. No, it just naturally happens.
So,
For me, one of my first, I didn't believe in Mercury retrograde, and it was 2010,
mhm,
and I was going to Burning Man, which was happening during Mercury retrograde in the middle of August. So, summer vibe.
right.
And I went kiteboarding and I got what's called teabagged, which is where the kite got caught in the power zone. I got pulled out of the water and dunked in the water twice,
Oh,
bruising my
dear.
rib cage.
Ow.
Luckily, I survived. It was a little scary, but then I went to Burning Man with a bruised rib cage, and I was talking to a man saying, "I don't believe in Mercury retrograde, but this just happened, and this just happened, and this just happened." And he goes, "Okay, listen to yourself. You know, you're describing a Mercury retrograde experience to the T, but you're saying you don't want to believe in it." He's like, "Maybe you should consider just accepting that sometimes things go awry, and that it's part of the flow of astrology that we can see these things and prepare for them." um,
Absolutely.
so how can we, in general, with just general Mercury retrogrades, how can we, like, should I have not gone kiteboarding because I was going
Well,
to Burning Man? Like, how could I have managed that situation better, knowing the chaos that can occur during Mercury retrograde?
the thing is, right off the hop, the stuff that you're mentioning, it's either that Mercury retrograde was happening in your 12th house, or it was happening in your 5th house. 5th house is the fun that you have, or it was, you know what I mean, like the retreat, water areas that you're having fun. Maybe it was at a campground or a cottage, for example, right? But if it's your local beach, then it was probably your 5th house. So when you look at these things, and this is what I was telling my students earlier with the Mercury retrograde that happened in January, is to track your transits, and you'll see
How
what
do you track
happens.
your transits?
Well, if for people that don't have astrology software, you go to astro.com, enter all your birth data, and then you'll have your natal chart. And then you'll have the option to click on, to add the transits. So the transits, what that is where the planets are at any given moment in time. So knowing that Mercury retrograde is coming, what you do is you look at the degrees that Mercury will go station direct and station retrograde. So as Mercury is scheduled to station direct, we look at that degree that it first hit. So that's what we call the shadow season. So this is when I met this gentleman, for example. And then, so as it went retrograde, that's, another key degree. So I just happened to be back at that campsite. So then it's going to go back. There's a different perspective offered on the same theme, but the theme is definitely apparent. And another thing too is also the re-editing of and the reviewing of all, the projects that I have in the works as well.
Right.
So
I do
these are
find
career stuff,
for
career
me,
related issues.
that makes a lot of sense in general for Mercury retrogrades without knowing my degrees and things, just as a more overview. One thing
Hmm.
I've learned is I just try to make sure that I am giving myself space to have time to reflect
Yep.
and to not start new things. Like I pause on new projects
Good idea.
and I just kind of try to clean my closets. I try to like wrap up and put a bow on things that just need completed and need put aside. And I do get a little cautious about um things like travel, but if I do have to travel during it, I'm traveling in the end of the shadow phase the day after this one ends, and I'm just my flight already got changed and I'm just rolling with it. I'm just like, well, Mercury
That's what you
retrograde.
have to be. You have to be flexible, because don't forget the two is that Mercury is a mutable planet. So mutable means in astrology is you have to have flexibility, adaptability, and also there's that aspect of changeability, because it rules both Gemini and Virgo. So what do Virgo and Gemini do? They end seasons. They still hold that season, expecting the new one to come. So and that's the
So
thing.
interesting.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
so interesting that they both end seasons.
yeah,
Never
they do.
thought about that.
Yeah.
Fascinating to me. So also, do you sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm not gonna travel or I'm not gonna buy that new thing because it's Mercury retrograde." Is that a good idea to kind of is it better to kind of not travel or to not purchase technology? I understand.
Well, look at I traveled during Mercury retrograde.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was square Neptune. So there's a car. Neptune is music. So here I am jamming to tunes in my vehicle. Do 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 do. And then I blindly followed this vehicle that was in front of me pulling the trailer and veered off. And I knew I had to veer left, but it was at the next place, not the first one.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it just clued in. My head was in the clouds, Neptune, and Mercury ruling cognitive ability, right? Heads was Kelvin, and all of a sudden it's hitting me. Wait a second. The river is a little closer to the road that I remember. Then all of a sudden I'm hitting gravel road. I'm like, I took a wrong turn somewhere. And you know what I mean? You just got to flow with it,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. And so, oh, well, you know,
I
and you know
also
what? When awareness is key, right? And, you just got to smile and laugh and
I
go
also
with it.
bought a car during Mercury retrograde that broke down
And
the next week. And then I took it back to the dealership and they were like, this is your problem, and I had to fight with them about it, but I finally got them to agree to like take care of it.
yeah,
It took us a year. They struggled to fix it, and they finally fixed it almost a year later by doing a major overhaul. And it was
wow.
during a Mercury retrograde that it got fixed, which I thought was interesting. I was like, oh, weird. I bought it during Mercury retrograde. It collapsed. The car broke within a week and within it. And then a year later, or like maybe it wasn't quite a year, but something like 9 months later, another Mercury retrograde happened and they finally got it fixed. And I thought maybe that's how it should be. Is there a pattern where things that happened during Mercury retrograde would come back again during future ones?
There is, and there can be, not necessarily. It's just what makes it repetitive is that you have to look at what it's aspecting at the same time. It's not just Mercury. Mercury retrograde doesn't just do it alone. You know what I mean? For example, this eclipse that's coming up this week. It's conjunct the eclipse, and it's in, what I mean, in the sign of Gemini.
What does
So
that
this
mean?
is
What does conjunct the eclipse mean?
conjunct the eclipse. So what happens is that in order for eclipse to occur, we have what's called the North Node. And we have the North Node and the South Node. So this series of eclipses are happening on the axis of Gemini and Sagittarius. So with this eclipse here, Mercury retrograde just happens to be conjunct the North Node. So the North Node is one of the very few no-fail gains areas in your chart. And yeah, like this is going to be a big one. And yes, there's cycles that are involved. There's just like eclipses have certain cycles that have similar themes, symmetrical geometry. But what is it affecting in your chart? Like, what is it hitting? Um,
Mhm.
I've had that similar experience too, where there was being an astrologer, I was kind of like, well, it's still shadow period, so maybe I could still buy this phone for my best friend at the time, to help her out. And then sure enough, I ended up getting stamped for the whole bill contract in it. Yeah. It was a little bit of chaos. But then when Mercury retrograde came back, she came back into my life after I, cut that off, and then trying to excuse herself and stuff like that. And then but yeah, it plays out in a different area of your chart, and it aspects differently. And there's without getting too complicated, there's different transits at play, namely Mars, that activates certain areas.
I've also had friends say to me, I was born during Mercury retrograde, and so it actually goes really great for me and it's a really positive experience for me. Is there a truth in that?
There is a truth to that, where you're, because it's comfortable, it's comfortable energy, right? And see, the thing is, some, like for example, last year, 2020, chaos, right? So what was, the predominant aspect last year? Jupiter conjunct Pluto. This year, it's Saturn square Uranus. So, and this is quite a question I posted to students, in class one time, was, test question. Said, what would make somebody's, more comfortable with Saturn square Uranus versus another? Somebody that has Saturn square Uranus in the chart. So
Hmm.
I am the Saturn square Uranus. So I'm comfortable with this energy. I've had this energy my whole life, right?
Right. Hmm.
So like yourself, Mercury retrograde, it's naturally reflective energy.
Right. And I just have friends who have that. I don't think I was born. I should get an astrologer to tell me, but I don't think I was born during one. But
Oh,
I've
okay.
had multiple friends tell me, "Oh, I was born during it, and it seems to always be great for me." And I'm like, "Interesting." Like,
Yeah, and the thing is, like, during Mercury retrograde, signing contracts and all these kinds of things, like, you can't let life, what I mean, stop you. Life goes on, right?
yeah.
So, people would buy, houses, and, during the Mercury retrograde, you just have to be, very careful. You know,
Cross your
look
T's and
for,
dot your I's.
cross your E's and dust your T's.
I used to run large volunteer programs where we would have 50 students come out, and I would take them on these from East Asia, and they would come to Portland, and I would take them on these big tours of volunteering in various experiences around nonprofits around town. And it was a lot, and it could be a lot of chaos. And if it was a Mercury retrograde, it was a joke at my work that I would say, "Oh, that's a Mercury retrograde, let's all make sure we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's," because just be really extra prepared, just have
Yeah,
everything squared away, and then still have room and flexibility for it to be wonky.
yeah, absolutely. You got your plan A, you got your plan B, and then it's a good idea to have plan C too.
Yeah. So people talk about travel, not buying electronics, not signing contracts, and I say, make sure you have time for reflection, and that's why I also give a 10% discount during every Mercury retrograde. It's just 10% off. And if people know that about me, they can always make use of that, because I think it's a great time to get a reading, to sit with what
Absolutely.
is it that how do I best manage the messages coming through to me right now? Because I feel like messages get a little louder as to what we need to learn during it. So I always offer 10% off during Mercury retrograde, just to bring in that reflection.
And funny you say that, because the fact that you're like, you're not sure or not if you have Mercury retrograde, and your friends mention it to you that you do, is that for you to offer 10% discount during a Mercury retrograde makes you more powerful during that time too.
Oh, interesting. It's so fascinating. I would love to get more into astrology. What else would people want to be persuaded or dissuaded from during typical average Mercury retrogrades? And obviously, I'm learning today the best thing to do is to go learn what the details of that particular round is going to be about, because it's different every time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. See, the thing is, Mercury takes 88 days to go through the zodiac, right? So it's our fastest moving planet. And the thing is, with Mercury, it's also, it's in and out of aspect quite a bit with, the different players. But what do we have kicking this time around? Wow, we got a beautiful trine to Saturn that's in Aquarius, and especially with this eclipse coming around. So these are like, this is a beautiful Mercury retrograde. The fact that it's square Neptune, yeah, there's confusion, illusion, and that's what I, really don't like, about, the promotion of, the deception is, but Mercury square Neptune is great for creative writing. Is beautiful
Oh,
for, oh, absolutely.
well, good. I got to get into my book again.
Right. And that's the thing is that, and that's the reason why, I've taken pause and, doing a lot of writing, for the children's books. Um, and astrology is a symbolic language. Neptune is all about symbols. So, that archetype is an effect, and you're playing with, you know, the manifestation, the co-creating. That's just why I call, my company co-creating that today, because you're always co-creating with the cosmos, whether you like it or not.
Yes.
And yeah, there can be deception, there can be these things, but these are probabilities.
Mhm.
And like we were saying before, awareness is a key. If you know what's at play, what aspects it's making, you have beautiful manifestation with Saturn, that grounding energy as it squares Neptune, which is, boundless. It's creative, it's inspiration, it's all these beautiful things. It's bliss, it's transcendence. So, a person like yourself who's psychic, you know, great
Tapped
time.
in. Good time
Yeah,
to
it's a
get
great
tapped
time to
in.
tap in and get a consultation, hands
And
down. Yeah.
because you mentioned creative writing, I would love to hear more about, you said you're doing some more creative projects that are coming up, that you've been working on already, and they're coming out hopefully in December. Can you tell me a little bit more about those?
The projected time is during late fall, and so yeah, it's my passion is obviously creating educational tools and education, so in astrology obviously, and in the midst of writing two children's books, and one of them is, I am the zodiac, because
Yes.
everybody knows their sun sign, but you know what I mean, like we all have the planets somewhere in our birth chart, so we all get angry. We all have Mars, Aries somewhere. So
Mhm.
how do we tick? What makes us tick? Well, that's what our birth chart tells us. So we have a part, each and every part of the zodiac within us.
Fun. That sounds like a great children's book that I would have loved as a kid. My
Yeah.
first book on astrology was The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need, the big purple book.
Yeah.
I got that when I was in sixth grade,
Oh, good for you.
and I dove in and probably knew more then than I do now.
It's, you know what, there's many layers to the onion, and you know what, you can spend your whole lifetime researching and you'll never know it all. There's so many different branches of astrology.
Yes, that's why I
And
love tarot as well, is because that's what I tell my students when I teach classes is I love that I am a tarot master. I feel weird saying that, but I am. I know these cards very, very well, and I will never be done learning them. I'm I'm thrilled to always go deeper. And the more life experiences you have, the more you learn the cards. Like, oh, that's the
absolutely.
judgment card on this level I didn't understand before. But now that I went through that life experience, woohoo, I know that card.
Yeah, and you know what? I understand your humility as well, is because even myself, I have a hard time, and I think that's because of the Neptune influence in my chart of humility. But and also Saturn is so strong in my chart of perfection. Being the perfectionist, is that when people compliment how talented I am, it's like, it's like, thank you. I'm
Well,
always trying to improve, and it's just that never you want to get better and better and better. And it's the modesty, right? So
yeah, one thing I love about the tarot that's also helped me with my writing is that it's me, but it's not me. And I'm able to step out of myself, and people are like, oh my God, that reading you gave me. I appreciate the compliment, but I feel like I'm just like it's a channel, and I'm grateful to be a part of that. But for
same
me,
here.
when I
Yeah.
now and so now I've been able to write more because of the tarot and that experience of being like, this isn't fully mine. And when Elizabeth Gilbert, who has my birthday, Elizabeth Gilbert, July 18th, woohoo, when she talks about how we're channeling a genie when we're writing, that combined with the tarot made me a lot more confident to just put words to paper and say I'm doing service through this writing, and I'm thrilled to be able to gift this to the world someday when I can get my fears and my anxieties of putting it out there out of the way, because all writers struggle with the publishing. It's just an
Yeah.
emotionally intense thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is that, and you hit the nail right on the head. And you know, as talented as, you know, an individual can be, like ourselves, for example, is that I think where the humility comes from is that knowing the teachers behind us that taught us their knowledge, and you know what I
Yes.
mean, is um to take ownership of that is kind of, you know what I mean.
Mhm, completely. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, so
yeah,
that's where the
completely.
humility comes in, and knowing that it's such a vast topic, that at the level that you're at any given point in time in your journey, that there's so much more to uncover.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's where the humility comes in, and in being able to do what we do, because at any given time it's a gift, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's amazing. I love
yeah,
it.
so same here.
Final little detail is general Mercury retrogrades. You know, we know what to dissuade from. We talked about that, but what do you
Yep.
persuade people to do? What's like how to step towards it with, you know, grace and curiosity?
When it comes to Mercury retrograde, anything and that goes with any planet that's retrograde. So re-edit, review, reflect,
Re
re. So
edit, review, reflect.
fill in the blank. So and once you get a good idea, you know, of the houses that it's playing in, so you know the context of the area of life that it's, yeah, that's asking you to do that. So like, for example, a 12th house is remeditate, re-listen, rest again, you know what I mean, like review all these things. And you tend to be more reflective in, you know, your dream world, you know, all these messages tend to come,
Mm,
and your intuition tends to be high.
mm,
um, when it comes to seventh house, for example, you know, the famous house of relationships, you know, review your
mhm.
relationships with others people, you know, your business contracts.
And communication wise, is there something we can do to just make sure our communications are clear during Mercury retrograde, or, you know, be more forgiving of others if they're not clear or something like that? I mean,
You hit the nail on the head. Be more forgiving, compassionate, understanding, knowing that you know, miscommunications can happen, and the perception of the communication that's being communicated to you is off as well. um, I'm going through that right now with my best friend.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's-
And it's interesting that I just had an interesting reunion with someone at the beginning of this Mercury retrograde. And I've sat with it of like, is this the right? And I really felt intuitively clear of like, yes, go check, go. Yes. It felt such a strong intuition. And so I think it's a big thing is just to take your pause and listen to what feels right for you. Because as an intuition coach, the thing I'm regularly telling people is, you know, you have to say, let me get back to you so that you
yeah,
can sit with your own reflection of intuition of like what feels right about this. Where's my boundary with this? Before
yeah,
just feeling like we have to always have an immediate answer, yes or no, just say, let me
absolutely.
get back to you and sit a day and feel what your answer is. And that's a major step towards building intuition and confidence in your self trust.
Yeah, and see with the fact that you're Aquarius rising, that Mercury retrograde is probably playing out in your fifth house. So it was a friend you had a reunion with.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that theme is going to be apparent during your Mercury retrograde.
So fascinating. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for joining me today. This has
Well,
been
thank you for having me. It's
such
been
a
a pleasure.
delight. And tell me again, I'm going to put a link in the description as to where people can find this flashcard system
Okay.
and anything else that you're sharing. And I'm looking forward to your more your children's books coming out in December.
Hmm.
Anything else you want to share?
Just that, you know, if consultations is what they're after as well, I do offer them.
You're in British Columbia and people can do in person with you and on Zoom.
Yeah. And typically my consultations are done on Zoom. So yeah, they just, you know, go to my website, www.cocreatingtoday.com, and my schedule's there. And yeah, as well as all the products in the store section, obviously. And there's wonderful free resources too at you know, on the resource page. So if they're looking to dive into astrology, know more about astrology, and some good quality areas on the web to go to, they can definitely hit that page.
Excellent. And people watching, please subscribe to my page for more interviews like this, as well as information around the tarot and other esoteric arts and intuition coaching. So hit that subscribe button and feel free to leave in the comments your own experiences with Mercury retrograde, your own impressions of what it's about, and any thoughts you have about our conversation today. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you, Nicole, for joining me. And I
Not a
look
problem.
forward to making the most of this Mercury retrograde by doing some creative writing.
Perfect. And for those who do leave comments in the section below and have questions about Mercury retrograde, I'll keep an eye on the chat and answer your questions as well.